the main points and do it really quick. You have a handout, and you also have a handout that is the PowerPoint that I was going to project and go through. But because of the long meeting today, I just kind of want to get you through what is going on right now. This is a quadrennial year. There are some things that I'd like to pass on to you so that you can help your constituents, because I'm sure that you probably will get a lot of calls this year. First of all, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to point out a few important dates and how-tos so that you're able to send your constituents where they need to get answers to their questions. So I want to start with, first things first, 2019 is a quadrennial year. What that means to us or to anyone is that everyone receives notice, every assessment is published. So 274,682 notices will go out. In that notice, there will be an insert, a brochure. You have that as your first brochure, not part of the PowerPoint, but that is the first brochure in your stuff that you receive from Beth. So that brochure talks about how assessed values are calculated, and the most important thing that it does is it lists the 5 tax forms that we will do throughout the county, and that's a big deal. We put those in the newspapers, and we put them on this insert so that those 274,000 folks that open those notices know that they can come somewhere and get answers or get educated. I expect that those will be well attended. Even last year they were well attended. But that gives us the ability to kind of gloss over everything with them so that they can get to the determination of what their real issue is. Is their issue their tax bill? Is their issue their assessment? Is it that they're missing exemptions? What do they want to talk about so we can send them to the right people? So the tax forms are on the brochure, and they're in the PowerPoint. There are 2 pages of key dates that are in the PowerPoint. Those are just for your information so that you can see how the tax cycle runs through the entire year and how those time frames must be met for us to stay timely with regard to our tax bills, the calculation of rates, all of those things. How tax rates are calculated, that is part of the PowerPoint. The reason that that is included, and I'm not going to go through and read that word for word, that is going to be for you to look at, and when you have questions, you call me. Actually, can you write down this number? 815-200-5043. You can text me or call me at any time, day, night, weekend, whenever, so that you can help your constituents if they have a question and you're not sure of the answer after you have all of this. The reason that we put through how tax rates are calculated is because many times a taxpayer will say to us, well, you're just raising my assessment because you need more money. The schools need more money. The increase in assessment or decrease in assessment has nothing to do with who needs more money. That has everything to do with the 3-year sales ratio study, what is going on economically, what the Department of Revenue has certified to me as to what the level of assessment is in each of the townships and countywide. So it's my job to make sure that we are where we need to be countywide, and it's also my job to make sure that each township is where they need to be so that we can be at 33 1/3 countywide. If I don't have all 24 townships where they need to be, that would mean that I may have to issue a county multiplier, which would be so unfair because one township may only need to 2% to get to 33 1/3. Another township might need 7. If I don't get everybody where they belong, I could end up with a county multiplier of 4 when that's not going to work. That's going to screw things up, make things unequitable, not fair. So that's why I added the tax rates and the township multiplier calculations. Township multipliers are given to the township assessors before they start doing their assessing. They are told, this is what the Department of Revenue certified as a 3-year median for you. You need to be at 33 1/3. You're only at 32.5. According to my calculations, your township needs 3%. The township assessor's job is to decide where they allocate that 3% across their properties in their township. If they do nothing, I place 3% across their township residentially. If they do a little bit of work where they think they need to make adjustments, whatever the leftover is, then I apply that to their township. There's an exemption brochure that's included that talks about all of the exemptions that are available to taxpayers. I wanted to highlight that because if you get calls from constituents or you get questions, it's really important that we make sure that they're applying for the exemptions that they're statutorily entitled to. So that is a big piece as well. The exemptions are fairly flat, fairly simple. The general homestead, you live in the home and you own the home, $6,000. You can get a general homestead if you're leasing a home owned by someone else, if the lease says that you're responsible for the taxes. That's important to know because we get a lot of questions on that. You can't just get it because you're renting the house. You actually have to have a lease on file with us that says you are responsible for the taxes as the lessee. The senior homestead exemption, 65, live in the home, own the home, 5,000 assessed off.
You don't have to wait for your birthday, which is a big thing, and part of, we do a lot of corrections for people that wait until after their birthday to apply. If your birthday is December 15th, you can still apply for it that year in April. So it's for any time that year, that tax year. Sorry.
Thanks, Barb. The senior citizen assessment freeze, we do 37 events, about 37, throughout the county to sign up seniors for the senior freeze. I guess the important thing that I wanted you to know about exemptions are that here in Will County, we have 44,000 senior citizens, 14,000 senior freezes, 5,000 veterans, 3,800 home improvements, and 29 lodges that receive. So all of those are reapplication every year. Those are an annual app every year that we have to process. We don't have to process a general every year. The township assessor can add or delete that. And we don't have to get information from a senior on a senior homestead because we monitor that through sales and death records. Yes, Jackie?
Are those numbers in here?
No, they're not. I got them from the county clerk's website, so, okay. There are 195,588 general homesteads. There are 44,107 senior citizen homesteads. There are 14,735 senior freezes. There are 5,010 veterans exemption. There are 29 veterans lodge freezes. There are 3,800 home improvement exemptions. And that's all I have. There are a few returning veterans, they don't even list them on the exemption report that I have. I think they put them maybe under other downstairs because they handle, removing the exemptions when we do our levies and so forth.
You didn't mention disabled persons.
Disabled persons, I think they fall under veterans. So I think the 5,010 is veterans and disabled persons. So the annual renewals are the freeze, the veteran, the disabled person, and the returning vet, and then the veterans lodges and so forth. So that's important to know because we have to process all those people every year.
So if it's an annual renewal, they have to reapply every year.
And they receive the application in the mail in April. So we send it to them, so they don't have to go searching for it. If they received it the year before, they're in the mailing for 2019.
So I have a friend who's a senior, and she was hospitalized, and this went unnoticed, and then she received her tax bill and went, wow. She contacted the county and was told, and it was not Will County, but she was told that, too bad, you missed it.
That's, what, was it Cook County?
I don't really want to say, but it wasn't Will County, and,
Just tell me if it was Cook.
no.
Okay.
It was
Well,
not.
then,
And
if
I-
it's any other county, if it's any of the collars, with the exception of Cook, because Cook's statutes are so much different than ours.
Mm-hmm.
But if her tax bill did not show an exemption that she didn't apply for because she was hospitalized, statute provides for a certificate of error, which is a correction to that tax bill, so that her second installment would be corrected, or if it was done after her second installment, she would get a refund.
Okay.
So in whatever county she's in, if it's any other county than Cook, I'm not sure why they said it's too bad, because the law calls for it. We have to, although we say July 1st is the deadline for exemption applications, we have to take them after July 1st up until even after the tax bill is issued. If they forgot or misplaced their papers or didn't file, statute says we have to correct it.
So that's very,
End of October, whenever state's attorney kind of cuts us off.
Well, that's when,
the
prior to the
following year,
tax sale.
yeah.
We can't do anything after the tax sale. So when the treasurer's office holds the tax sale in...
well, she didn't forfeit, she paid the tax bill, but she wound up paying the whole amount without an exemption, which to
It
me was
should-
very burdensome.
Yeah, it
I-
should be corrected.
Is there a reason why they have to do this every year? We know seniors aren't getting any younger.
I'm
What's
assuming
the
it's a senior,
logic?
I'm assuming it's a senior freeze, because in most places, and it's been a long time here in Will County, we needed a board resolution to say, because we used to send out postcards to seniors for the senior homestead. That's just the flat 5,000. And we eliminated that by county board resolution. So we do not make them reapply. Senior freeze, that's different. They have to apply because that's based on income, and income can change every year. So that's the necessary,
Although, I mean, if you're 85,
and that's
I
according
think
to,
you're-
and that's according to state statutes. So it's not, believe me, there are many things I agree with you
Yeah.
about where it
Yeah.
would make more sense to not have these folks have to reapply and find a different way to do
Unless you win the
it.
lottery.
Yeah, but we have to do that,
Thank you.
so.
Well, I mean, and sometimes if they have to pull out money, unfortunately, that is taxable income. And I don't always agree with, state statutes either, but they count that as income. So if they pull out money to fix their roof for medical reasons, for anything, it's taxable income, and we have to unfortunately use that. And there are years that a senior will lose their freeze and have to pay that tax bill the following year. And some of them have pretty big freezes if they've been on it for a long time. So it is kind of sad. I mean, I hear it a lot, but, you know, our hands are kind of tied as far as that
And it's the
goes.
same with the veterans. We need an annual application from the veterans because their percentage of disability might change. And many of them hope that their percentage will change to a higher percentage because if you're 70% or more disabled, you pay no bill. Free. Up to a $750,000 market home.
So if we come across anyone in Will County that needs help or is not familiar with this, we can have them call you?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Let's see. We talked about disabled, we talked about returning vets. The first thing that we do in a quadrennial year, which is why I really wanted to get access to all of you, is we want to make sure that in a quadrennial year, before someone jumps and files an appeal, that one, we try to educate them, so we hope that they will come to the tax forum and learn before they jump to file an appeal. Because filing an appeal because you think your taxes are going up that's not a good reason. Filing an appeal is about whether your market value is wrong or whether you're being treated unfairly amongst your neighbors, like houses, so forth, same area. The thing that we try to do is, even the voicemail in our office, we try to send them to the website and we send them to their local assessor first, because they may not have to file an appeal. You know, all 24 of these assessors and their clerical staff are human beings, and human beings make mistakes. So if there's an error in an assessment, the township assessor can fix that and send to us and say, this was incorrect, before someone has to file an appeal. An appeal is, I wouldn't call it cumbersome, it's pretty low-key, you don't need an attorney, but you have to put together all the paperwork, and so you're better off to go to your township assessor. They're elected, they work for you, and ask them, how did you arrive at this value? Because then they've given you your case, basically. They've pulled the comps they used, or they've pulled the market sales and said, this is how we got there. Now then, as the taxpayer, you can look at that and say, well, that doesn't look correct to me, or whatever the case may be. So we always start with the local assessor to see if they can correct something before an appeal is filed. I did include a little bit of information about parcel assignment, legal descriptions, about the mapping area of our office. So we do have a county GIS, and we do have a mapping and platting office. The mapping and platting resides under the supervisor of assessments. The mapping and platting utilizes the same Esri product that GIS downstairs uses, but our office is responsible for issuing new parcel numbers, whether there be a division or a new subdivision, a consolidation. Our office is also responsible for every single recorded deed that comes through the recorder, comes through the mapping office, to make sure that the PIN and the legal description are correct and that the deed has the correct names on it as far as the grantor goes. If the grantor doesn't match what the previous deed said or who we say the owner is, then we do what we call a bad deed letter. We have to get that corrected. Otherwise, we are also responsible for making all the name and address changes of where a tax bill is to go and where an assessment notice is to go. So we have to be sure before we go in and make any of those changes. So we're reviewing and verifying, validating every deed that comes out of the recorder.
So how do you know, how do you guys know if you have there's an address change? Like, for instance, and then this is DuPage County, but I had always received my grandmother's condo property tax bill. And then this year I didn't get it, and I had to pay mine. I'm like, oh my gosh, where's my grandmother's? And I know I never received it, and I called, and they had changed the address, because it always came to mind, because my grandmother had passed at 101, and I was doing all their stuff prior for years, right? So somehow they changed it back to her old address, and so how do you guys, I know it's not anything to do with you, how do you know an address changes and that?
So we have specific provisions, procedures that we work by and that have been, what I want to say, approved by the state's attorney's office. We, unlike DuPage, we do mapping and platting in the supervisor of assessments office. DuPage happens to be a county that does their mapping through their GIS. That means that someone else not consistent with the process is, the mapping is held somewhere else. So I think that because the mapping is within our office, we have less issues because we're looking at, and we have all of that data. So we have something called PIN history. PIN history is every recorded deed and every name change ever made. So if I get a deed on your property that says the grantor was Judy Ogala and the grantee is Barb Valek, when I go through and look at that, or when my staff does, they're going to look at that PIN number and that legal description first. They need to make sure those match, or we won't even look at the deed if those are wrong. The other thing that they will do then is go to the PIN history and see that Judy Ogala truly is the owner who's granting ownership to Barb Valek. So all of those things are documented and in a place in our office so that we can verify and make sure that things are going to the right place. We would never arbitrarily just change an address. If somebody came in and said, if you came in and said, well, I'm Judy Ogala and I want my bill to go to 123 Smith Street, we would not allow you to do that unless we have to have a form on file that you fill out, that you sign. We make sure you're truly the owner, and that's the only way we'll change something. So that somebody off the street can't just come and say, well, mail, Meta's tax bill to Rachel, or Rachel mail, you have to be, you have to be the owner, and you have to sign off, and we keep track of all that. So that's something that's pretty important. You have brochures. These are the same brochures that we use at our events. We hand these out at the events, understanding how a tax bill is calculated. I think most of you understand how an assessment is calculated, and that an assessment only has bearing on the rate by looking at the total assessment in a particular tax code, dividing that by the levied dollars to come up with what that rate is. So if all assessments were 10% under or 10% over, it wouldn't change what can be levied. It would only change what the rate is. Does that make sense? So the taxing bodies are still going to get what they received the prior year, and they are entitled by statute to ask for 5% or the cost of living. And they are also able to capture their new property in a levy worksheet. So I guess my point is that it's very important that when we talk to constituents or taxpayers, as soon as they mention that their assessment went up and my bill's going to go up, that's not necessarily true. Technically, the higher assessments go, if the taxing bodies hold the line and they don't ask for additional money, the rate should go down. Does that make sense? Rachel?
I have a question, and maybe it's be covered here, so if if you
No,
need to
that's
wait to
okay.
answer, that's fine.
I'm just trying to go fast because I know you guys have been through a long day
Okay.
already.
So the concern, I hear this from people who, they say, well, not the tax rate, but the final dollar taxes go up. And they said, because my value of my house goes up every year, so why, if every 4 years I'm supposed to be reassessed, is my value going up? But then if something happens to my house and it impacts the value of it, and I call, they say, oh, no, you have to wait for one of the 4 years in order to go down. So what
They
am I
should-
supposed to say to people
You,
about
you,
that?
you should say to that taxpayer, Jim Smith, every 4 years is a quadrennial year. The only thing different in a quadrennial year is that we have to publish every assessment and we have to mail every notice. You still have to be at 33 1/3 in the quad year and any of the other 3 years prior to the quad. So we're doing the same thing as far as the sales ratio study goes. We do the same thing in a non-quad as we do in a quad at looking at those values. So if an assessor is telling
Okay.
a taxpayer, well, we don't do that till the quad, you're stuck with that for 3 years till we get to the quad, that's absolutely wrong. And if they can't get through to their assessor, then please have them call me. Not at that 200 number, at the office.
This is like an urban myth that gets generated, because then a lot of
Yeah.
people then come and say that, and I'm like, I don't know what to say about that.
Statute just requires that in some fashion, the assessor is supposed to look at every property in a quad year.
Okay.
Doesn't mean they have to go knock at the door or out to measure it or look at it. They can do it from, our technology. We have pictometry. We can measure a house from our desktops, and the assessors have that as well.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry? Oh, we just have to make sure that they're doing the same thing every year. The only difference in a quad is that everybody gets a notice. And I believe that when that was put in statute, it was probably because if you just apply a multiplier to a township, you don't have to send notice. You don't have to publish. You just publish the multiplier. Joliet got a 1.0822 across everything. But in a quad year, you have to publish all of those, and you have to mail them to the taxpayer. So I think it's for the betterment of the taxpayer to at least every 4 years get this piece of paper, this mailed notice. Okay, I don't want to keep you any longer. Questions? Anything, throw it at me. It's got to be something. Nothing? Go ahead.
All right, so another thing I heard, and I don't understand this argument. I tried really hard to understand it, so maybe it's baloney. But it was said that they assess at a half, and then it gets cut in half. So by the time you see the third, it's like it should be, you're assessing at 1/3, not a half, 1/3, but it really becomes 1/6, because it's like half of another tax initially.
The only place that you'll see a 1/6 of an assessment is under farmland, under wasteland, or other.
Okay,
A residential house, if its market is 300,000, it's going to be assessed at 100,000. If it's owner occupied, you're going to subtract
and
6,000.
nothing is done initially to that assessed value before the 1/3 is taken? Okay.
No.
They're making it sound like they half that first assessed value, and so by the time you take the 1/3, it's really a sixth of it, so we're overpaying our taxes.
No,
And
that's not
I couldn't
it.
understand the argument, but so I didn't know how to respond, so I was
Yeah,
like, I'll
and
ask
everything is
Rhonda
1/3.
about that.
In all of the counties other than Cook, everything is 1/3. So 1/3 for commercial, industrial. The only thing that's not 1/3 is anything that has a preferential assessment. So open space, farmland, conservation stewardship, model homes. There are provisions in the statute that tell us how we must assess those, and those are not at the 1/3 of market value.
Okay. And those-
And those require application too.
I just have a question.
Yes.
So for like the mobile home communities, what happens with them?
So mobile home tax is done by the treasurer's office. they have to complete, the treasurer's office sends them something, they have to complete that information. That's by state law, so many cents per square foot if it's a mobile home.
Okay.
And the treasurer's office sends that bill. The owner of the park that the model
Right, the,
model homes sit in, that tax bill for that land goes to that owner of the park.
and that's still done by the treasurer's office
No,
too?
that's done by upstairs.
Oh, it's
us.
done by you guys?
Yes.
So you assess, so how do you assess those, like a mobile home park in my neighborhood versus a mobile home park in her neighborhood?
Same way.
Same way? Okay.
Yeah, all consistent.
I wasn't sure at all how that happened, how that was handled. Okay.
Yeah, all consistent. Any other questions? If you have questions after you look at the material, I would be happy to answer them. Just call, come see me after committee, whatever.
I have. Are you presenting information first and then opening it up to question answer?
Yes,
Okay.
always.
And then how long, is there, you think, an hour to most of them?
It depends
or
how many
go
people we
long?
get.
Three
If I
go
get-
really long. If I go, I'm planning on going to one. I might not stay for all the questions.
Yeah, the presentation is not what takes long, it's all the questions.
Questions, yeah.
It's very similar to kind of what she did, maybe a little shorter in
Yeah.
the day, but gets interrupted a lot.
But it's very,
because
and it usually is heated.
Okay.
They're,
Well, I
they
just want to
usually
attend
don't have-
one and see.
They don't have
you
nice
know,
things
and
to
see
say,
how
and
it
they're not
goes and
happy.
just be there. Okay, thank you. Just curious.
Yes.
On tax forums, I noticed there isn't one super far up north anywhere in the county. Is that because there's not a need for it? People aren't asking, or?
The furthest,
I'm gonna tell you.
the
they are
furthest
asking,
north
so
we
that's
go
fine.
is DuPage
Okay,
Township.
Bolingbrook, yeah, okay.
So when we lay these out, Barb and I do this, we try to look at the township, the
Okay.
township map for our county and try to make an assumption that if somebody wants to come from Wheatland, they're probably going to come to DuPage.
Okay.
If somebody wants to come from Plainfield, they may go to Lockport.
Right, okay.
And all the way down.
Okay.
Particular area or
No, I just
neighborhood, or-
was making sure
Oh,
before
and that's the other
I
thing.
show this to people and they go, I'm gonna join, That's okay, don't worry.
But if you ever have an issue in a particular neighborhood,
You can add it, we can still add.
that we can still add one, Good? Thank you so much for staying. I know it's been a long day, and I appreciate it.